Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar in which we will discuss the anatomy of the CodeCov breach. My name is Andy Thompson, and I'm an advisor and evangelist for CyberArk Labs. This is the team at CyberArk that does ongoing research into offensive technology and information security trends. Today, I will be sharing our research into the CodeCov breach together with my colleague, Brandon Traffanstedt.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andy, and thanks everyone for joining. Andy, I noticed you look a little different. Did you get a haircut there? I don't know. It looks nice all the same. But webcam jokes aside, speaking of jokes, on Thursday, April 1st, 2020, the folks at CodeCov learned that someone had gained unauthorized access to their bash uploader script and modified it without permission. May have been April Fool's, but this was no joke. It was the real thing. Per CodeCov's own security updates, our investigation has determined that beginning January 31st, 2021, there were periodic unauthorized alterations of our bash uploader script by a third party, which enabled them to export information stored in our users' continuous integration, or CI environments. This information was then sent to a third-party server outside of CodeCov's infrastructure. Among other security misconfigurations, a simple error in their Docker image creation allowed the actor to extract the credentials required to access and modify that bash uploader script. Immediately upon becoming aware of the issue, CodeCov took action by securing and remediating the affected script, as well as beginning an investigation on the potential impact. It was a little bit too late, though. The damage had already been done. For the past 3 months, or the last 3 months in that case, anyone using CodeCov's bash uploader script had their passwords siphoned right out from under their noses. This single compromise has led to other big-name data breaches too. I'm not sure we'll ever know the exact numbers, but hundreds of clients were exposed. It was a near flawless attack of the DevOps supply chain.
Why are we bringing up CodeCov specifically? Well, here's the deal. Things have changed drastically. Take a look at the slide here. The hungry little caterpillar here is turning into a chrysalis and finally into a beautiful butterfly. The thing has changed utterly, completely, 1,000%. I know it's kind of corny, but that's kind of about what we're talking here with automation in the cloud. This changes everything. First, the old methodology of DMZs and firewalls is still a critical element of information security, but now we're no longer being constrained by a single perimeter. The old castle and moat architecture of the past is gone. Your data, your services, your identities, they all still exist, just outside of the bounds of your own data center. Next, there's fragmented cloud security architecture. Well, what do I mean by this? Well, our systems architecture have changed so much in the last few years. Previously, it was just on-prem. Then the digital transformation to the cloud, and then the adoption of multiple cloud and hybrid environments, each with their own security concerns and tooling. This created a problem I like to call fragmented security architecture. Along with your fragmented architecture, you have some fragmented staffing as well. With all these changes, there's a lack of cloud security professionals and expertise. This is probably the scariest one for me, though. With DevOps and automation come an exponential growth in the number, the types, the sheer volume of identities, roles, permissions, keys, credentials, and more. If you're not prepared for this, this can be daunting.
No doubt. And the dichotomy between the operational effectivity, that shift left, that move to the cloud and DevOps is interesting because we get operational benefits, but you've also seen some of the operational challenges that come with dealing with automation and that very big shift to cloud ops. Now I'll take a turn to talk about relevant threats to cloud and DevOps shops, including CodeCov, that you should be mindful of. First, we have the ever-present challenge of misconfigured access and over-permissioned identities. This is by far the most common thing we're going to see out there. Time and time again, we see situations where accounts were overprivileged out of lack of knowledge, or worse yet, just out of convenience. In the CodeCov breach, we believe that misconfigured access was the initial foothold into the organization. Also, another thing that we often see is a situation where an account is configured in a way that has admin privileges when it really shouldn't. This is a specific type of misconfiguration that we call a shadow admin account. If you want to learn more about those, come chat with us sometimes and we'll tell you all about them. Anyway, insecure access is another threat we see in the wild today regarding cloud and DevOps. If you're not familiar with I'll call it the security search engine Shodan, you should be. It's a powerful search engine that security pros use to see what's exposed to the internet. I guarantee you, or I'll stand on my head and eat a bucket of scorpions, that if we did a search right now, we'd find multiple DevOps orchestration tools publicly exposed and accessible to the worldwide interwebs. This is a huge no-no, and we see it all the time. Now, since we're talking about big no-nos and oopsies, another thing we see all too often is credentials being exposed in varying ways. Whether they're chilling out in clear text in your Cloud CLI tools or peppered throughout your DevOps configurations, credentials are an integral part of a CI/CD pipeline. Apps are people too. People need to authenticate. In today's analysis, you'll see several of these threats were leveraged as part of the data breach. Moving on, what you're going to see with the CodeCov breach is how the attack differed from the traditional attack flow. Case in point, looking at a traditional attack flow you've probably seen, compromise an environment, escalate privilege, move laterally, continue to escalate, rinse and repeat, then own and exfiltrate. It's tried and true, but it also requires some degree of work and effort. Mandiant states that as of 2021, the median dwell time an attacker will remain undiscovered in a target network has dropped down to 24 days. That's good, because in previous years, it was hovering around 100. Wow. But still, 24 days is still 24 days. That's 24 days an attacker can spend rooting around inside of your environment. But here's the raw deal. There was an easier way for attackers to compromise a network. It's a lot easier to hit privileged passwords or API keys to a cloud environment because you just have one stop before you pass go and collect $200. Talk about legit efficiency.
Now, the CodeCov breach is one of the latest examples of how supply chain attacks are so destructive and damaging. Also, you can see here that supply chain attacks are nothing new either. 2016, a BitTorrent client transmissions source code was backdoored on GitHub. 2017, a popular cleanup application by the name of CCleaner was backdoored as well due to a compromised code signing certificate. And most recently, you might have heard about a little supply chain attack that exposed 18,000 networks to a Russian APT. In December 2020, SolarWinds code build process was compromised, allowing a backdoor to be slipped into their Orion product. And just this weekend, Kaseya's update process was compromised to push our evil ransomware to possibly over 1 million endpoints. As you can see here, the supply chain attacks keep coming. There are plenty. And again, this isn't a new attack vector. I'm sad to say this, but supply chain attacks are going to continue to happen and will most likely increase in the years to come. Now, supply chain attacks come in different flavors: hardware, services, data providers, along with enterprise and end-user software. The last two have the most significant complexity, but also the highest impact. In general, the complexity of such an attack is high, but the potential impact is huge, opening up many, many doors to other infected organizations. Now, supply chain attacks make for great hacks for at least 3 reasons. 1, the breadth and effectiveness. By compromising a single player in the software supply chain, bad actors can potentially infect any organization who uses the hacked or backdoored product. Number 2, digital signatures. The software is signed by the original developers, so digital signatures indicate it's legit. And number 3, virtually unlimited attack surface. There's no easy way to put a stop to these hacks. Why? Because nearly all software products and projects use third-party libraries, and it's nearly impossible to ensure that they're all legitimate.
No doubt. And with every single breach analysis that we do, we try to break the attack into different phases. We did the same here with CodeCov, where you're going to see a lot of those principles that Andy just shared play out in real time. The first phase of the attack focuses on the initial compromise of CodeCov's infrastructure. The second phase zeroes in on how compromising the code will allow the ultimate execution, which is phase 3, the execution of the endgame and the beginning of subsequently many more breaches. So Andy, take us through it, man.
Okay, let's jump right in and focus on stage 1, the initial breach. So here is what happened. It all started with the bad actors gaining access to CodeCov's Google Cloud storage keys. How they access those keys is still to be determined, but once inside the storage, they were able to spot a vulnerability in CodeCov's Docker image creation process. My guess is that it was a hard-coded credential, super common situation, and that allowed the actor to extract the credential required to move on to the next phase of the attack. All right. Now we move into stage 2. Sensitive credentials have been stolen. Attackers can now edit the code. Now we can move into the next phase of the attack, phase 2, code compromise. Really, it was just one simple change. That's all that was made. You can see here that this line of code was altered and replaced CodeCov.io with the redacted IP address. Note that the IP address of the third-party server here has been redacted as it's currently part of an ongoing federal investigation. We'll discuss what the code is actually doing in the third part of our phase breakdown, which is phase 3, execution of end game. You see, I don't believe CodeCov was the target here. They were just the perfect mark, which led to compromising potentially hundreds of other organizations. That's the real end game. In phase 3, we'll discuss what happened along with the trail of data breaches left in CodeCov's wake. So after the malicious code was injected into the build, any credential that passed through CodeCov was promptly handed over to an actively listening adversary. According to CEO Jared Engelberg, he stated the altered version of the bash uploader script exposed any credentials, tokens, or keys that our customers were passing through their CI runner that would be accessible when the bash uploader script was executed. Second, any services, data stores, or application code that could be accessed using these credentials, tokens, or keys. And third, the get remote information or repositories using bash uploaders to upload coverage to CodeCov and CI. Basically, that's everything, folks. And here's really the sad part about this. The company didn't even know about the breach until a customer of theirs noticed that the digital fingerprint, aka the SHA checksum, for their bash uploader executable didn't match the fingerprint contained in the file downloaded from their website, which means the file had been tampered with. Let me break this down for you. Due to an exposed key, the attacker was able to access and manipulate the code behind CodeCov's tool and siphon off credentials and all of their SaaS clients. They didn't even know this for months. They were undetected until a client notified them. Crazy stuff here, folks.
Definitely, Andy. And I'll tell you, the first company to publicly acknowledge this exposure was HashiCorp, a company that markets open source developer and security tools for cloud computing infrastructure. Hashi said a post-breach investigation found a subset of its CI pipelines used the effective CodeCov component. Specifically, the GPG private key used for signing hashes to validate HashiCorp product downloads was exposed. While investigation hasn't revealed evidence of unauthorized usage of the exposed GPG key, it's been rotated in order for Hashi to maintain a trusted signing mechanism, which is a fantastic practice, so mad props to Hashi there. Following HashiCorp's statement, San Francisco-based Twilio issued an advisory to confirm that it also used the compromised bash uploader component in a small number of projects and CI pipelines. Subsequent investigation into the impact of the event found that a small number of email addresses has been exfiltrated by an unknown attacker as a result of said exposure. Twilio notified those impacted individuals privately and have remediated the additional potential exposure by thoroughly reviewing and rotating any potentially exposed credentials. You're probably starting to see a little bit of a pattern here. This is just the tip of the iceberg, though. Mark my words, it's only the beginning. In the weeks and months to come, there's going to be more fallout from the initial CodeCov breach. More breached organizations are out there. They just haven't come to light yet.
Yeah. So you've seen how the entire attack went down from beginning to end. Now it's time to discuss mitigation. Let's re-examine the stages and techniques used and discuss the CyberArk angle. So even if you didn't follow all the details of the attack, here's your chance to jump back in and gain a few usable insights. It's basically money time. So while there's no one vendor or tool that completely prevent digital supply chain attacks like this from happening, there are steps organizations can take to strengthen their security postures and minimize risk. First, external code reviews. Don't let their developers pull and use open source code straight from the internet. Before any software is updated, these changes have to go through code checking review and signing processes by another party, someone that can guard against both unintentional oversight and insider threats. Which plays nicely into my second point, perform code signature checks. By simply checking the software's digital fingerprint to verify its integrity, the dwell time of the attack could have been limited to mere days or even hours rather than months. Next up, mandate multi-factor authentication. By looking at this attack process from the attacker's point of view, the breach was made a lot simpler because they didn't need a second authentication factor or another piece of approval to insert their code. Next up, don't store credentials and secrets in environment variables. The reasons are numerous, and most notably, it's extremely hard to track usage of environment variables as they're passed down from child processes that allow for unintended access and break the principle of least privilege. Instead, if an application requires a secret to be handed over in an environment variable, use a secrets manager to help ensure only authenticated users get access to clear text secrets. And lastly, implement threat detection capabilities. CI/CD pipelines are highly automated, which means there's very little human interaction, making it easier for attackers to fly under the radar. Having threat detection capabilities in place could help detect anomalies and potential breaches easier and faster. All right.
And Andy, thank you so much for that, sir.
My pleasure.
I think there's a lot to break down as sort of part of that attack. And as with every supply chain, you're going to see multiple moving parts and strategies. So we wanted to give you a couple things to think about as you head out from the session today. And we'll do it in two ways. First, we'll look at things that are available in a free and open source capacity, but also give you some high-level recommendations too. First of all, and you've heard this from us, especially Andy, a number of times, and that is assume breach. One of the best mitigation strategies is to assume that there's already a threat actor taking advantage of that beautiful, delicious, creamy, nougaty network that you've built over the years. What this means to me is start to look at ways of being proactive with how you respond. For instance, in each of the examples we gave you today, and in probably every one of the customers affected on the end user end, secrets needed to be rotated after they were exposed environment variables. Wouldn't it be better if we were rotating the secrets beforehand rather than afterwards? Or at the very least, having visibility that the secrets were being leveraged in the MVARs. There are things you can do with free technology like CyberArk DNA to give you that visibility, but if you have discovery and you have password vaulting, use that, extend it out past some of the more traditional use cases, and do so in a way that that prioritizes the larger targets, some of whom are developers these days. Second, reassess tools, processes, and especially permissions that are being used in your pipelines. For instance, I may have processes running in AWS or Azure where there are tons of permissions to pull from, and chances are in the initial configuration we said, well, we don't want that application or that pipeline or that component to break, so let's just go ahead and give it the permissions that it needs, which in a lot of times, in a lot of cases, are over permission. This is how that concept of a shadow admin gets born. There are tools out there that can allow you to visualize this risk in each of your cloud service providers. And CyberArk provides one. You can find it inside the resources area if you want to learn more. We call it CEM. Next, as I said earlier, developers are being targeted. They're becoming not only, or have been, critical parts of the business, but also getting more and more highly powerful access. So you must include their endpoints and identities as part of your greater security strategy. Case in point, Andy talked about cloud CLI tools earlier, which have a little bit of a habit of storing the secret being used in plain text. Look at ways that we can do things like proactively monitor or block that thing from happening, or better yet, in a lot of cases, developers will have full administrative rights on their endpoints because they have to elevate certain applications. There are ways that allow you to remove those while allowing developers to elevate only certain things or signed elements so that we're not creating some operational burden as we place more security and scrutiny on the developer persona. And finally, and probably my favorite part of the whole thing around the immediate takeaways, look at, and by the way, validate the signing keys and the fingerprints of open source technology to help you remove those existence of secrets in environment variables. Andy talked about delivering a secret securely, but there are tools out there, and CyberArk has actually built one in an open source state that can allow applications to authenticate securely to then use variabilized secrets, and after the process terminates, the secret magically disappears. So automatically clearing cases where MVARs need to be used because we don't want to change our code or we don't want to stop variabilizing. So long story short, high-level strategies, but there are a number of potential options out there for you to start taking a look at how you begin to steel yourselves to something like this happening in the future. With that said, thank you all so much again. Andy, as always, thanks to you and the labs team for putting in the effort to analyze what happened with CodeCov, and also to continue looking at this breach and how it plays out, as well as all further breaches too. Andy, I got to know, do we have time for questions? Maybe a couple of them.
We'll take a look and see if we have a couple. Yes, we have a few that have piled up here. We'll take a couple. What do I do if we're under an active breach scenario? Does CyberArk offer any sort of breach response services?
I think that one's you, or is it me? Do you want to take a go at it?
Yeah, we absolutely do. So we do offer breach remediation services. In fact, we often joke that we may not be the first call. Mandian's usually the first call, but we're quite often number two. We facilitate the rotation and ultimately the kicking out of the bad actors in the organization. So yes, we do offer breach remediation services. So if you want to know more, reach out to your local CyberArk solutions engineer or account executive, and we'll be more than happy to help you. All right, let's see if we have another question here. You said that on a customer side, rotating secrets is one solution, but there can be all kinds of secrets and environment variables. How do you prioritize which to target? That's a good one for you.
Oh man, that is an awesome question. You're right. There are tons and tons of secrets, metric tons of them, imperial tons of them. I don't know measurements, but the more tools we get, the more we have this whole rainbow unicorn of digital transformation happens. We're just going to end up with more secrets to deal with, and prioritization of topics. So I'll give you a couple of recommendations. The first is, and what I mean by that is, if you can think of a particular application, type of system, or environment that if it's compromised, it makes your stomach turn over and you're not just hungry for lunch, that's something that should be prioritized. We used to call this tier 0, but now I feel like there are like tiers and extra tiers. But prioritize things that have an incredibly powerful impact to the business, that have customer-facing data, that have employee data, or that are simply mission critical, not only for the business, but for day-to-day operations. That's number one. But then number two, there's also the human element of it as well. Some teams are going to be more likely to have good experiences with something like secrets management. For instance, your vendors may have very powerful integrations with one particular tool in the CI/CD pipeline, or maybe a few of them. So look at ways that you can get this high security impact with lower amounts of developer impact. So making sure that you're keeping the operational element tight, challenging your vendors to integrate with as many tools as possible, so people don't have to go out and change their code. The other side of that people element is friendly teams. If you've not talked to your cloud team or members of your DevOps team from a security perspective, y'all take them out for ice cream, buy them pizza, have a conversation around things you know on the security front, and working that into this model of bring your own security. In a lot of cases, your developers, your cloud engineers do care about security, but if it's not their sort of titled focus, it just might not be at the top of their mind. So look for friendly teams who really understand what you're doing. And if you're having a challenge with that conversation, maybe this idea of environment variables and CI/CD pipelines and image registries, maybe it feels like a second language. Ask your vendors and your partners to help you out with those conversations. They're ones folks like us have all the time, but use the resources that are available to you that aren't just technology, but also there's that people side of things too, which is incredibly powerful, even though we talked a lot about securing non-human pipelines as part of this session. And wow, I got rambly there. Sorry about that, Andy.
No worries, man. No worries. When you get on a roll, you don't stop at the BT. So, all right. Well, I think we actually had a little bit of an AV hiccup there as well. So with that, I think we're going to call the Q&A for now. For those of you, I know there are a bunch that still have pending questions. We will get to you though via email. So thank you so much for your time. We truly appreciate it. Brandon, do you have any closing remarks before we conclude today?
Nope, nothing from me besides echoing the thanks. Thanks so much, everyone.
All right, have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.
Cheers all.